Hey everybody, later on today I have a 2014 Ford Escape that I have to put this in. So let's open up the box and see what's in it. Hey, nice aluminum foil. And it seals up pretty good. Let me put you back in here. This is what I have to put in that 2014 Ford Escape all-wheel drive. It's the rear end, rear differential. It's got a bearing in it making noise. Ford had 30 of these in stock, and supposedly you got this here or this here. There's some number that you have to put in the computer so the computer knows which rear end you have in the vehicle. So that's what we'll be doing today. I'll have to get it in. I got another couple cars to work on, but I'm going to get this in and start taking it apart. So there's our job for today. Okay, we're back on the Escape. That means the rear end. I got it up in the air, and let's first go over what the instructions tell you to do. Instructions tell you to take the brake caliper off, the brake caliper holder, the rotor off, the axle nut off. And once you get this, you can disconnect the line and get it up out of the way and get the brake hose up out of the way. Then they tell you to take the sway bar pins loose. And I do believe why they tell you that is because this is the axle right here. This is the sway bar link right here. You have to take this off so this will lower down enough to get the axle out. Because the axle on this, they want you to pull out through the bearing. So you have to pull the bearing out. The bearing bolts in through from the back. Then it tells you to take the springs out. And I think the reason why they tell you to take the springs out is just for safety, because the shock here is what is holding the springs in. So they tell you to put a jiggle jack underneath here and disconnect the shock and then take the spring out. So then after you get all that stuff loose, then you have the front drive shaft there that needs to come out. And there are some other wire connections up here that we'll have to look at. So let me start taking some of the brake stuff apart and the rotors off, and let's see if we can get the axles out of it first, and then we'll come back to see how and what else we need to do. All right, I got a bunch of stuff taken apart here, so let's go over it. So first thing you got the caliper. The caliper takes 7mm Allens. You take those out, and then right here where the caliper bracket bolt is, that is a 13, so you take those out. Then you take the rotor off, and then you have to take out the ABS sensor, which is a T25, I do believe. And then after you take the T25 out, they also tell you to take the sway bar link pin out. And the reason why they tell you to take the sway bar link pin out is so you can push the sway bar down. So when you slide the axle out, it doesn't get in your way. So then you got to take out the bearing assembly that has 4 bolts that come through the back. They are reverse Torx. I don't remember what size they are. They're an E something. Well, they're a reverse Torx. So then after you get the bearing taken out, then you can pop the axle out to get it all apart. And so there's the bearing, the axle, and the dust shield for the brake. And on this side here, I'll show you, I still have the bearing hanging here on the axle. I had to take a air hammer and drive in here to get this to pop out. I have a new bearing. I'm going to go ahead and install it on this side. As you see, the axle's stuck here. I already hit it with an air hammer with a whack. That should come out. And like I said, up here, there's the caliper. I got the caliper hanging up here. And then these lines here just pop out of holders here and here. and the ABS sensors. But you have to take the ABS sensor out to get the axle out or you'll break it. So that's where I'm at right now. I've got the axles out. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put it back up in the air, put a jiggle jack underneath this control arm to compress the spring, and then we'll disconnect the shock here, and then we'll get the springs out. They want you to take the springs out because I think once we start unbolting this, once we take this out, this might drop farther. And then also too, while I'm in here, I don't know if you can see it, the lower control arm bushing, see how bad it's twisted? Well, the bushing inside is beginning to fail. So I think we need those little tiny control arms. We'll replace both of them too. It'll be easier to change them now while they're out. And I'll change the bearing on the other side. I've already changed the bearing on this side, as you can see. I've got anti-seize here. This is why this one just fell apart. All right, well, it's late tonight, so I'll go ahead and wrap this up for tonight, and we'll get back on it tomorrow, and I'll do some more filming when we come in tomorrow. Okay, so now I'm starting to work on the drive shaft bolts. It's a T45, and here's something I want to show you, is when you put the socket in, there's no room here to put the ratchet. You put a ratchet in here, you're going to be torquing down on the socket like this, and you could strip these. These things have some type of Loctite on them, and they're very difficult to get out. So what I have done is, the shank is an 8mm. So how I get these things loose is I put my 8mm super long wrench on there to break them free, because see how they are still very tight. And then I have another one that's a ratcheting ratchet that I'm going to get in there and get the rest of them out with the ratcheting ratchet. I got it right here. Let me go ahead and put it back together. And now with the ratcheting ratchet, I can get in here and ratchet them the rest of the way out. So I have the rear drive shaft popped out, so that's all set to go. Now we're going to go ahead and do what they said to do, is to pop the springs out. So I put a jiggle jack under the front of the car, so when you lift up on the springs, the front won't come off the rack. So everything else is out. The axles are out, the bearings are out, all the brakes are up there. So I'll take our jiggle jack here and we'll put them underneath the control arm, jack it up, then we'll bust the shocks loose. Now, hey, this is very dangerous. If you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. Springs have a lot of kinetic energy built up, and if they fly out of here, they could kill you. So you got to be very, very careful doing this. I would not recommend anybody doing this unless you're a professional. All right, let me get the springs out and I'll come back. So I put the jiggle jack underneath the control arm. I disconnected the shock. I even disconnected the control arm up here, and the spring still won't come out. So I guess what they want you to do is take this bolt out to get this control arm to swing down to let it out. But I actually don't see any reason why I need to. I have that disconnected. This is all part of that subframe. So what I'm going to do is, there's a bolt here that bolts the subframe to the car. Well, I can just go up through the center of the spring there, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go up through the center of the spring, take those two bolts out. I have this loose, then I have to take this out. I do believe they're, oh, and while I was up here, I went ahead and unplugged the ABS line that plugs in right there, and on the other side there's two connectors I unplugged so this wouldn't get caught up. I might come back up in here and take the parking brake cable line loose so it doesn't get in my way. Once I get that bolt out, then all I have is these bolts holding it in, and hopefully it'll come right down. So let me go get the transmission jack. They did say something about there's a line there I disconnected. There's that other line. There might be another couple lines up in here I might have to disconnect when I start lowering it down. So I'm not going to take the springs out. I'm going to leave them like right there. They're in there. They're not going to come out. So we'll see how it goes from there. All right, got all four subframe bolts out. Let's set it up. There's an exhaust clamp you have to pop off. rear end vent line. Alright, so there is the rear subframe down. I had to disconnect this vent line, and then this wire here that I already had unplugged had another connector here at the frame, and that runs into the electronics for this rear end. So now it looks like we have to take that bolt loose, these bolts loose, probably these mounts here, and switch them to the other one, switch the vent line, the electrical connection. But there's the rear subframe out of the car. I did not have to take the springs out. They have nice big alignment pins for the frame, so hopefully I'll be able to get that line back up. So let me start getting the rear end the rest of the way out. So what I did is I took, it's a bolt here and a bolt here, and then it's a bolt and a nut here and a bolt and a nut here, and the rear end just fell down. I picked it up, brought it over. So here's the new rear end and the old rear end. So we're gonna have to switch the brackets from there onto this one, and those two brackets on there. So there's a side by side. Alrighty, well, we have the new rear end bolted in to the housing. We got a bolt here, and a bolt and a nut here, and a bolt and a nut here. I have the vent tube plugged in. I have the wire harness plugged in. It's really nice that this wire harness also unplugs over here. So now the next thing is just to re-stab it in and put everything together. This video's probably gone long enough, so I'm going to cut it off at here so I can get it done. But there you go. That's how you put the rear end in one of these newer Escapes where the rear end is underneath. Oh, and here's another thing too. We have to take the number off of the rear end here, or this one here, and go into the computer and program the computer to know that it's got a different rear end in it. Luckily, we have a friend that has a computer that can do that for us. So once I get this all in, we're going to call him. He's going to come out and reprogram it. So this is a job that you're probably not going to be able to do on your own unless you can reprogram the computer with the new rear end number. All right, everybody, as always, thanks for watching. Give me a thumbs up if you like the video. And We'll catch you all in the next one. Thanks.